Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. Today we're continuing, I guess, our conversation about ability scores. In the last video, which I just finished recording, and now I have this on my head, so I'm just recording this right away, I talked about, do we even need ability scores and kind of what their role is and how I'm developing a game. If you haven't seen that video, that's the one before this one. In any case, there is a thought, and I've seen this in several games now, and people talk about it, that we don't really need ability scores anymore. We just need the modifiers. Now, if you're playing a straight up D20 system, that is roll a D20, add your ability score modifier, try to hit a target, on the surface, that seems to make sense. You think to yourself, yeah, all I really use is the +3 from my intelligence when I do my investigation check. But that might just be because you and your group are not being creative enough with how to use the ability scores. I find that the ability scores can be used in so many different ways, the actual number, not just the modifier. So in this video, I'm just going to talk about how I do it at my table, and maybe some of these will be useful for you. Roll under. Let's get this one out of the way. First, this is the most classic OSR or old school way to use an ability score before there was skill systems, and that is roll under your ability score. You want to try to walk across a tightrope, roll under your dexterity. You want to try to move a big boulder, roll under your strength. You want to try to survive or hold your breath, let's say, for a long time, roll under your constitution. This is pretty common, and you can then use modifiers depending on how difficult the situation is. I find this is, again, the most common way people use it. It is my least favorite way. One modifier that I've made to this, or one modification, is that, so in the basic system, you roll a d20 under. I guess I should have said that. And in fact, this whole game is based around rolling a d20 under your ability score, but we're going to skip that for now. The way I've modified that, and I've talked about this before, is instead of using a d20, I use d6s, and I use a number of d6s based on the difficulty of the task. A standard task that's hard enough that you have to roll for, but, you know, that's standard, 3d6, and you might do 4d6 for more difficult, 5d6 for very difficult, 6d6 for incredibly difficult. And what this does is it scales the number without having to change, like say, okay, this is a +3, +2. It's just easier for me to do it that way. It's simple, and I mostly use d6s at my table, so it's just easier. Roll under is a good way to use the ability score, and of course, if you don't have an ability score and you just have a modifier, you can't do that. Target number. Not that kind of target number. In this case, and this is something we see all the ways back in, this is the first place I've seen it, like age-wise, B1, the adventure B1, there's a, spoiler, there's a spot where something needs to be moved or in a certain situation. And what it says is that it takes a total of X, I can't remember how much, amount of strength points to move this. That is to say, you could have, let's say, a huge iron door in front of you, and to open it, you don't use a regular open door check. You say, to open this door that was once made by giants, it takes a total of 50 points of strength. So if the party, working together, enough of them can, add their strengths together and get 50 or better, they can open the door. If not, they can't. And this is really nice because what's cool here is that it's a pretty fun way to kind of illustrate how difficult something is or how strong something is that could do it by themselves. And it also forces people to work together. And again, if you're opening a door, you can't have your weapons ready. So it's kind of like the obvious thing isn't necessarily to have the fighter with the 18 strength do it. It might be better to have several of the weaker people do it and then have the fighters ready to attack. It creates strategy, it creates teamwork, and I find this works great. I use this a lot. What is the tool? You could even use it for intelligence. The most common place I use it is strength, but I'm just thinking now, intelligence is great too. You want to try to interpret this, go into this library, there's a bunch of books, you want to research something. Well, in order to research it, you need this much intelligence in total to do it, right? Within the certain time limit. So how many of our characters do we want to devote here to make sure that we get this right? I think that in most cases, you don't necessarily want to tell the player characters that, but you can give them some kind of information and say, well, you know that one person is not going to be able to figure this out. They used to use a cabal of 5 wizards to research this kind of stuff, that kind of stuff, right? So this way we get a little bit of information so they don't just put one person in there and fail. That wouldn't be fun. It's always good to know the odds on some level, but maybe not the total odds. So total number of ability score points, in my opinion, is a great way to use the ability scores. And again, you can't do it if you just have the modifiers. For that commenter, or maybe many of you, that's going to say, well, you could just say a total number of modifiers to do this. Yeah, you could do that. That's 100% true. But it also means that anybody who isn't really good at something would be useless. This way, even the person with the 8 strength might help if that just pushes you over the top. Whereas in the modifier way, they'd actually make a penalty. So, yeah, not the same. Interesting damage. Well, I talked about this in my hit point video. You can use ability scores as a way for the player characters to take damage that maybe is more interesting than hit points. That is, a poison reduces their con or possibly their strength. A blow on the head might reduce their intelligence temporarily or their dexterity. These kind of things can, it's not just, oh, okay, I have 8 hit points and now I got to be careful because anything I run into can kill me. It can be, well, this trap lowered your dex. This trap or poison lowered your con, and it gives the characters a little more survivability, but also something to play off of and creates a situation instead of just a I'm alive or I'm dead. Again, go back to the hit point video. I talk about this a lot more. Contested activities. This is one that I'll use every once in a while, and I think it's pretty good. You can either just straight up say the person with the higher ability score wins, or what I usually like to do is add a little randomness to it and do some kind of a roll, like a D8 or even a D10, and say, okay, you're trying to beat this person at chess, roll a D10 plus your int, they're going to roll a D10 plus their int, and whoever wins, wins, right? You could do it for an arm wrestling match, you could do it for any number of things, but a contested score, again, it adds a little bit more. I get that you could just use your modifier, a D20 plus your modifier, but this just adds a different way to use the score. It makes the scores that are lower not be terrible, right? It just really gives more depth to the game. If we're using ability scores, assuming that after the other video you haven't determined you don't need them, I think using the actual score still matters. Stripping things down to the absolute basics of just numbers is fine. It simplifies on some level, but simplification also can lead to sameness. And if we have the initial ability score that the players can use in various different ways, I think we just add more depth to the game, more options for you to make rulings, more options for the player characters to try things. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Check the description, you'll find a link to my Discord server, join the conversation over there, and my Patreon if you want to support the channels. I'll talk to you soon.